Welcome, viewers, to another episode of the It Depends podcast. Most of you are already following Bernard Marr because he has a whopping 1.5 million followers on LinkedIn. I'm honored he has joined this podcast. As a brief background, Bernard is a prolific keynote speaker. He's an AI futurist and has authored several books. In fact, his newest book is called Generative AI in Practice, and it is soon to be published. He lives in the UK, but we met up last week in Boston at the IBM Think 24 conference. He travels extensively. I'm so glad, Bernard, you found time and you've come to this podcast. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Sanjeev. It was so lovely to meet you in Boston. And I remember we were talking over a drink, thing, you need to come on my podcast. I would love
Yes.
to. I would love
Thank
to.
you. I've admired the work you've done from far. So this was such an honor to actually see you in person and discuss various topics. So let's get started with some background. I know I didn't do much justice. You have a very rich background. Can you please tell us? I'm also very interested in your how you ended up in the position you are today, starting from what was your educational background?
Yeah, so I started university in Germany studying engineering and business. That was a combined master's degree. And then and there was a big focus on IT as well as part of this. And then my university had a relationship with Cambridge University, so I then went there to finish my degree and write my two dissertations. And I wrote a dissertation on evaluating the different balanced scorecard packages that were out there in the market. That tells you how that was a long time ago. This was just when the first BI platforms started to emerge as balanced scorecard tools. And Cambridge University had a relationship with Gartner, and then Gartner ended up publishing my dissertation as the first Gartner report on balanced scorecard software, which then really catapulted me into this industry. And I've always followed it very closely. So I've always looked at how companies use data to inform strategic decision making, and then obviously all the technology around it. And then this naturally, then Cambridge offered me a job after I finished my degree. So I thought this is great. I don't need to look for a job, and this is a nice organization to work for. So I became a research fellow, looking up at how companies use data. Then I moved from Cambridge to Cranfield School of Management, a very practical business school where I was doing research and teaching lots of management executive education programs on how companies use data, but also how they create strategy. So I was doing lots of strategic consulting work at that point for companies, helping them to define their strategy, helping them to define performance indicators and the right ways to analyze their data. And then this whole space then very quickly became analytics, big data, AI, and I've just
Mhm.
followed all of this along. And like so many people in academia, you start writing books. Everyone around me wrote books. So I started editing my first book and realized that this was actually a lot of hard work because I ended up rewriting most of the chapters and thought maybe I can actually do it myself. So I wrote my first book
Which
on
year and
uh,
what topic?
I can't actually remember 20 over 20 years
I
ago.
see. Okay.
And and then my first book was on performance management. Then I
Mhm.
wrote one on the intelligent organization, so how
Mm.
companies use analytics and data to become more intelligent, more strategic. And then I focus on lots of executive books that really focus on big emerging topics like big data,
Mm.
AI. I've written big data in practice, artificial intelligence in practice, and the most recent one is generative AI in practice. But I've also written books on much wider topics like the biggest business trends, the biggest technology
Mm.
trends, and one is called The Future Internet, which looks at the metaverse and blockchain technology. And then I've written one um, on future skills, because very often when I do keynotes, after every presentation, people come up to me and say, okay, all of these crazy technology
Mm.
innovations, they will transform of all our jobs and all our work. What does that mean? What skills do you need? And I have three children myself, so I started thinking about how do they need to prepare for this world, and then I wrote a book on future skills.
This is why I'm super excited about this discussion because this is the year we are trying to put AI into practice, and AI has amazing benefits, but then also it's very disrupting. We're already starting to see that. So we want to talk more about your newest book. But before we go there, I'm curious, how many books have you written? Are you keeping a count, or it's like so many? Just
Yeah, I'm on 23, I believe now.
23. Wow. How long does it take? How long did it take you to write your newest book?
So the normally it takes me around 7 months to write a book. Um, but this one, the generative AI in practice one, I have written in just 4 months, and that was super fast. But I felt it was really good because it felt really fresh, and because every week there's a new major announcement.
Yes.
Companies
Mhm.
change names of products, so I was actually pleased that this was so fast, and I'm becoming better at writing books.
Uh-huh.
Because what I do basically is I write a lot of the content that will then get into the book in articles. So I had written probably 100 Forbes articles on generative AI before I wrote the book, and I then purposefully write one on what is generative AI, what are the risks, what are the downsides, what are the benefits. So and then you can almost I can almost then put some of this content into a book. I just need to rewrite it a little, but then it turns into a
Yeah.
nicely flowing book with obviously some new use cases and some fresh content.
I have so many questions for you, but I want this episode to be inspiring to people who want to follow your footsteps. So one lesson that I've already learned is if you want to write a book, write a series of articles because then you have a body of work and it's easy to then put it together instead of trying to boil the ocean. So that's one lesson I've learned already. Also, uh, I have questions about the role of ChatGPT in this. But before we go there, I'm literally like my mind is just filled with questions. You mentioned that you wrote the first ever report for Gartner on BI scorecards, but you weren't working for Gartner, which is interesting, right? Unless I'm mistaken. Like,
Yeah, no,
did
I
Gartner?
I wasn't. No, it was a relationship Gardner had with Cambridge University.
Oh, wow. Because I used to work at Gartner, and this is the first time I've heard of such a concept because I don't think they do that anymore, not for a long time, where you have to be a Gartner analyst to write reports,
Yeah.
unless
Yes, I assume that that was a one-off
I
that
see.
happened 25 years ago. And for me, it was lovely because I was just finishing my studies and it was
Oh, wow.
generating some nice income for me because they were selling it and I would
Oh,
get
okay.
commission for every report they sold. So that was
Wow.
nice.
Interesting concept. There's hope for me. So, just kidding. Okay, so going back to my question earlier, what role did ChatGPT, if any, play in your writing the book? By ChatGPT, I mean any other similar chatbot, natural
Yeah,
language.
huge.
Oh,
They I think they brought AI into the public consciousness
hmm
and just catapulted the concept of AI and made it something that everyone, even your grandparents could suddenly understand and see and even for me, someone that follows the whole space of AI super closely, I was blown away by how capable these tools are and what they can do. And and so that obviously everyone was now talking about ChatGPT and AI, and that helps because I could just write article after article about all the new use cases and the benefits and the downsides. So a lot of content I wrote around ChatGPT when it came out.
Got it. If you had not used ChatGPT, would you still have been able to write this book in 4 months?
Absolutely. I didn't use ChatGPT in the book at all
I
because
see.
that is something that I made a conscious decision
I see.
about, that
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that it is actually my authentic
Hmm.
voice. And I actually believe that people read my books and like my books is because in the way I write. And hopefully people tell me I have this ability to explain really complicated topics in a nice, easily accessible way, because I need to make it accessible for me, for my own mind, to be able to explain it to
Mhm.
others. And I feel if I get ChatGPT to write my books, then I make myself redundant, if you know what I mean, because anyone can use ChatGPT then to write their own book about generative AI.
Do you feel there is some angst for content writers that once your books are published, then your books may be used to train models, and you don't get any royalty from that?
100%. And I think that is rightly so. I think the concerns are very important for people to have. My personal situation is slightly different because I have a big platform that is really valuable. So if I was just a content writer,
Hmm.
that would make me much more vulnerable. Um, the other challenge is that I write about things that no one has written about yet,
Hmm.
because I look at the latest technology trends where there are no case studies. This is why I write my books, because I talk about the very latest things that companies talk to me about and say, hey, and I have a really good relationship with all the big technology companies like Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, Oracle, and many others. And I have the benefit that they give me access to some of their latest case studies. So saying, hey, there's this company that is using really cutting edge. They really have a cutting edge application of generative AI. No one has seen this yet. Do you want an exclusive? So this is how I can stay up to date with all the latest trends, and
Last,
no one has written about it. So I can
yeah,
ask ChatGPT to write about the future of AI, but it can't actually use any content because no content has yet been
has
created.
correct. Which is why it's so admirable. What you do is you just thinking ahead, and the industry hopefully is moving in that direction. Talking about learning from these latest developments, as I mentioned, we were at IBM Think 24 last week. What did you think of the conference? What were some of your key learnings from that event?
Yeah, I thought it was a great event. For me, there were some interesting topics that AI, obviously, and generative AI right at the center of everything. For me, there was a huge focus on partnerships, which was really interesting. I had the pleasure to attend the partnership day, which was the day before things started. This is only for their big partners, and they were giving out awards for partnerships. And even as a company, they now have committed to 50% of revenue coming via
Hmm.
partners. So that was a big takeaway for me. And then another big takeaway around open sourcing their tools, which is interesting. There's an interesting debate, I think, going on. Do we really open source our large language models, our foundation models? And IBM has gone down this route and believes very strongly. I guess this comes from their Red Hat heritage as well, that they believe in that. And then another big trend was around digital labor and automation in organizations. And I guess this is where IBM's sweet spot is, where they can sell technology and consulting services together. But for me, it was all about their focus on making the point several times that we now have these large language models that contain almost all of public data that we have available in the world, but actually only a tiny fraction of enterprise data is in it. So I took away that this was IBM's mission to get more enterprise data into these
Hmm.
large language models and then fine tune them. And then again, what I found fascinating is their ability to fine tune them using synthetic data. So even
Hmm.
if you have smaller amounts of enterprise data, you can use these pre-trained models. You can give them a little bit of input, and then the AI will generate some data that will help it to fine tune itself. So
Yeah.
that is an exciting area that I think I took away as something. And then the whole automation piece, how they're now using Gen AI in pretty much everything from their business intelligence suites that can now analyze data for you. And this is something I'm seeing across so many of my customers, that these all of their products are becoming so much more intelligent, and they are somehow democratizing many of these technologies. So in the past, you needed some real analytics capabilities to understand what data you have, how to extract this data, how to turn this into insights. And now you all you need is a chat interface where you can talk to it and say, hey, who are my most profitable customers? And we'll go off and find this information for you. That is pretty exciting stuff.
Yes, I completely agree. They're open source that run models. They introduced something in collaboration with Red Hat called Instruct Lab,
Mm,
where that synthetic data and taxonomy to fine-tune models, and then they're pretty much putting Granite LLMs beneath all their service offerings. You mentioned automation. IBM just recently announced their plans to buy HashiCorp, so I think that also adds to the automation story. And then they're huge in hybrid because of Red Hat
mm.
acquisition from many years ago. So, do you think LLMs, large language models, are a commodity, and who should be developing? Because these LLMs require humongous factories of GPUs, which we know are super expensive, they're supply constrained. So, what is the future of LLMs in your mind?
Yes, I believe that to some extent they are a commodity now, but companies will have to monetize, otherwise they can't afford
Yeah,
to run
correct.
those models simply because of all the energy costs.
Okay.
But it's very interesting with all the open sourcing happening. I find it intriguing. I'm almost watching it as an outside observer,
Hmm.
seeing where is this all going? How are companies monetizing it? I believe that at the moment, companies like OpenAI are giving everyone free access to the tool
Yeah.
to get people used to it.
Omni. Yep.
And at some point, I'm sure there will that they have a monetization plan behind all of that. Um, and I guess the whole idea of getting enterprises to use these customized versions of their models, I think this is where the real income is in
Yeah.
the long term.
See, this
But
is, yeah.
yeah, yeah, you make the
See,
point that the huge energy consumption. This was actually something I felt
hmm,
wasn't probably as much talked about at the IBM conference in Boston,
hmm,
where I think sustainability could have been slightly more in the center of some of those conversations, because for me there's a big question mark that we sometimes talk about the benefits of these AIs and helping us save energy, helping us make our planet better, creating smart cities, smart energy grids that will save us a huge amount of energy. But at the same time, the whole cloud um, industry now consumes as much energy as the airline industry or even more. So we have to, I think, as an industry, be honest about the economic impact and the environmental impact as well.
hmm. Yeah, I very true. Sustainability is such a critical topic because of amount of power consumption these data centers need. I live in a desert state of Arizona, and there are data centers being built all around, massive data centers, global, from Intel to Taiwan Semiconductor to Meta to Google, and we don't have water, and these are all liquid cooled data centers in a very hot environment. So yeah, so sustainability, hugely important. While we were at the IBM event, Microsoft was also holding its Build conference. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about the three hyperscalers in the US? Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. Who has a lead, and what are some of your learnings from these three hyperscalers?
Yeah, so for me, uh, if you asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said, okay, AWS has a clear advantage
Mm-hmm.
above everyone else. For me now, Microsoft is getting very close, if especially with their relationship with OpenAI, and there might even be overtaking some of their capabilities. I think especially the capabilities of talking to businesses, making it really attractive,
Mm-hmm.
and building Gen AI into all of their products and services. So I think the competition has narrowed in my view. They're all doing amazing things. Um, yeah, for me, it's just fascinating to watch. And Google, I think, is another one that is, for me, trailing behind a little at the moment in this space.
I see.
What
Interesting.
what what what's your view on that?
So I feel that I have a very different take on what Microsoft is doing, because I know Microsoft and OpenAI are very close, but Microsoft invests in OpenAI. OpenAI uses Microsoft's Azure compute, and it just seems like the money is just exchanging back and forth, while Azure still hasn't fixed some of its very serious security holes. Um, as far as maturity is concerned, I think AWS is still by far the most mature because they are the category creators. Google is an enigma in my mind because I think Google has all the right engineering pieces, but Google and IBM have something similar. They've got amazing research. When it comes to go to market and taking their research into production, that's when things don't always go very well. So amazing engineering talent. In fact, a lot of stuff that we use today in Gen AI, like the transformer architecture, came from Google. Also, other technologies like Kubernetes, before that, Hadoop. And I feel that Google Cloud has finally gotten over this effort to really own this space, and I see them now making strides in the right direction. So that's my thinking. So
Yeah, no, it's very good. I like that.
yeah, and when it comes to large language models, yet another enigma. I see a lot of companies are busy developing their own LLMs, and I really feel that the reason they're developing LLMs is because the investor community expects them to be there, otherwise they'll be construed as being behind times. I was just seeing a few days ago, Snowflake announced its earnings and the EPS took a hit. One of the reasons was because of the high cost of GPUs. So it is actually training the models is having an impact on some of these companies' revenue, and but they have to do it, and I think it's important for Databricks, Snowflake to train their own models because there's so much learning that they get out of it. But in the big picture, the training of models should be left to very large providers such as hyperscalers, Meta, even Apple, although Apple is also falling behind, but knowing Apple, I'm sure something is brewing. Mistral and some of these very large companies, they should really be doing LLM training because LLMs do not have a technology moat. Everyone is training them on the same data using the same transformer architecture. The only moat LLMs have is the amount of capital they have, like $100 billion on their books that they can afford to spend, and the deep bench of technical skills that others don't have. Other than that, I think everybody else should just be using these LLMs. On Hugging Face, there are over 600,000 foundation models now. So these are like, you take Mistral, you fine tune it with some data, and you have your own model now. So I think most organizations should really be taking these models from Hugging Face, fine tuning them, although fine tuning is a bit hard, or doing RAG or prompt, and then using these models. That's my point of view.
Yeah, that's a very, very valid point, I think.
Yeah. So, so anyway, I'm super excited because next week is Snowflake Summit, and then the week after that is the Databricks Summit. And I really feel that both these companies are at such a pivotal moment in their existence because generative AI has really has sent shockwaves, in my opinion. It's caused disruption, not just in technology, but even organization. AWS now has a new leader. Snowflake has a new leader. I was just reading how Samsung, based out of South Korea, is feeling the heat because they're falling behind in the chips arena with NVIDIA and even other companies like Hynix and Taiwan Semiconductor taking the lead. So they've had to change their head of hardware engineering. So AI is playing whack-a-mole with everybody these days, whether it's technology or organization or processes, everything is up for disruption.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel it's the most transformative technology that we've ever seen
Yeah.
in human history. And that I think I believe that if you are a company and you don't see yourself as an AI company, or
Hmm.
at least an AI enabled business where AI plays a crucial role right in the center of your business strategy, every day you don't think that, you will simply fall behind because the technology is so transformative.
That is very interesting. I want to ask you about your book because your book is Generative AI Practical Uses. So, what are some of the practical uses that you've seen? Maybe some that even surprised you?
Yeah, so in what I wanted to do with this book is really showcase how organizations are using generative AI today. It's called Generative AI in Practice. There are 100 plus amazing ways organizations are using generative artificial intelligence to transform business and society. And this is hopefully what I've delivered, that I look at, after explaining what it is and the downsides and the risks and so on. I then look at pretty much every industry in every main sector, from healthcare to education to retail to entertainment, and anything else. And I give very practical examples of how organizations in all of those industries are using it. So for me, one of the most transformative examples is the application of generative AI in healthcare. I've got
Hmm.
tons of examples in there of how healthcare companies and pharmaceutical companies are now using generative AI to completely transform drug discovery and drug development processes. How amazing these tools are at not only creating words, but also analyzing data and coming up with new gene markers and new therapeutic avenues for these pharmaceutical companies, which is amazing. I see this in another area. I think it will completely transform is education. The whole idea that it would democratize education. I mean, anyone anywhere in the world can now download ChatGPT and you can have a conversation with it on pretty much any topic. And if you want to learn Chinese, or you want to learn coding, or you want to learn anything, you can do this just with this simple tool. But I find it fascinating how organizations like Duolingo, for example, the language learning app, is now integrating it into their platform because in the past they needed to, so for example, if you wanted to learn French and you wanted to learn French because you're a chemical engineer and you need to go to Paris to a conference, that's a very specific vocabulary that you need and quite unique conversation types you will have. With this new Duolingo, you can use generative AI to create those specialized conversations, which for me is fascinating. I also feel that generative AI will have an impact, a huge impact on the internet and how, especially making the internet more immersive. The big trend that we talked about before, Gen AI stole the spotlight, was companies talking about the metaverse and the more immersive 3D world of the future. The challenge here was, how do we build these? If you wanted to have a shop in the metaverse, some sort of 3D shop, you needed someone like a games designer to build that for you, which is very expensive. Now we can simply use generative AI to create us one. You can simply say, "Hey, build me a really cool headquarter in for the metaverse," and it will do this for you. And you can then fine tune it until you're happy with it. And for me, the applications in retail are really big, where you can try on things. So the only reason I go to a shop to try on, let's say I want to buy a suit or want to try on shoes, is because when you buy them online, you can't try them on. And you want to combine things as well. You might want to say, I want to wear this blazer with these trousers, with these shoes. In typical online environments, you can't do this yet.
I see.
In the future, what companies like Hugo Boss and others are now doing is that they're working on these generative AI capabilities where you use your smartphone to simply scan your body. You can then use the AI to create an outfit for you that combines things. So you can combine various clothing items,
Mhm.
and then you can use so that you can actually see how well they will fit on you. And then you can do something that you can't even do in today's dressing rooms. If you, for example, buy a new outfit for a cocktail party, you can then use generative AI to create the cocktail party around you. And then you can see yourself walking around in the cocktail party. Say, do I feel good in this outfit? And this is pretty cool. So, and then you can obviously see the implications
Yeah.
for entertainment, for sports broadcasting, for anything where you almost combine some of the metaverse elements with generative AI, and that is for me super exciting.
I am very curious if you worry sometimes that we may be putting the generative AI label on everything, and is there a danger that we may enter another AI winter if our expectations are too high, but we're not able to deliver it?
Yeah, and I think what I'm seeing is I see a lot of AI washing where companies put AI labels in front of pretty much anything. And there's a danger in this
Mhm.
because it destroys trust, it destroys people's understanding. So I was watching a Samsung ad on TV just yesterday, and they were talking about how their vacuum cleaner is now AI enabled. You think, okay,
Really?
that's almost taking it too far because how is this vacuum cleaner really AI enabled? And they have this whole range of products where they have a washing machine that is AI enabled. To some extent, I buy this a little bit because it can then sense the wash load and then run a program. It's not really AI, but I can see the point. When it comes to a vacuum cleaner, I really question that. So, so I feel there's a lot of AI washing. Everything now is AI. Everything is Gen AI. At the same time, so there's a risk. At the same time, I feel this technology is so transformative, and I believe, truly believe that this is the most powerful technology humans have ever had
Wow.
access to. And I believe that it is so transformative, and it will. And also, if you look at companies now, where do they really have options to increase
Mhm.
bottom line performance? Especially in a world where we have stagnating growth and high inflation, that is where most CEOs are looking at now, saying we need to look at automation, driving efficiency through AI, and also because this technology is now in all consumers' hands and everyone's playing around with it, our consumer expectations for intelligent applications is increasing. So I don't think companies will have a choice other than bringing this technology in to actually satisfy the increasing expectations of customers. So I don't see another AI winter coming anytime
Okay,
soon.
that's
At the
good to
same
hear.
time, we are in a huge bubble, and for me is I can see lots of parallels to the dot-com bubble, where
Mhm.
anything that had dot-com in front of it, people threw money at and invested in. I see something with AI happening now as well. We will see lots of casualties along the way. There are lots of companies people
Mhm.
are investing their money in that will not survive
Yeah.
very clearly. But I don't see a real winter. I will see, will we see lots of disappointment along the journey? Absolutely, because we see this with every major technology trend.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm quite an optimist, but I like the way you put it. We had dot-com boom, we had dot-com bust, and then there were all disappointment, like you said. But then technology kept improving behind the scenes. The attention moved away from World Wide Web for some time, and then before we knew, we were shopping, we were doing our taxes, we were buying our flights, we were doing everything on the web. So I think same thing's going to happen to AI. The question that begs is, you got three kids. How are you preparing them for AI, for this new world that's AI enabled, and how will it impact their jobs?
Yeah, I believe that AI and generative AI in particular will affect every single job on the
Mm,
planet. It will displace some jobs very clearly, but the vast majority of jobs it will augment.
mm,
So it will change the way we work, and then it will create new job opportunities. So my hope is that in the long run, and it's not just my hope, I believe that it will make our world a better place and a more human place, because I believe that we can pass over to the generative AI the things that we shouldn't really waste our amazing human capabilities and potential on. I think we are living in the world where we're facing huge challenges around the environment, around the economy, around inequality. And what we need to do is we need to solve these problems, and we need every bit of our amazing human capabilities. And sometimes it feels like these AIs are outsmarting us. I don't see this right now, because these large language models in the end are a bit like parrots. What they're doing is they're predicting the next word or the next number or the next pixel on a
mhm,
photo. They don't understand what they're producing, they don't understand context. Hence, we get things like hallucinations. And so they are very limited, but hugely capable. So what we need to do is we need to take the best of us humans and combine them with the best of what machines can give us.
mm,
And I believe the best that humans can give is actually that they are the skills that truly make us human. They are our ability to imagine a better future and make this happen. They are our creativity, our imagination, our creative problem solving, our the ability to challenge truth, the emotional intelligence, the interpersonal communication, all of these things that are vitally important. So, what I believe is going to happen is that will push us more towards actually fulfilling the full potential that humans have. And if
mm,
we just look at one example, a radiologist, right? So, in the past, that person spent 8 hours a day looking at scans, trying to figure out, is this a broken bone? Is this a
Yeah.
precancerous cell? And you think, is this really the best use of their time? Or would it be better for a machine to do this? A machine that can analyze an entire CT scan and not only look at things, because we humans have biases and we also are sometimes tired. We've just had an argument with our partner. We then go to work and try to read these scans. We miss things. The
Mhm.
AIs are generally better at that
Mm.
part. And actually, wouldn't it be better to use our human skills to do more research on radiology and taking the field forward and spending more time with patients, really explaining what this all means to them and figuring out the best treatment plans. So for me, it moves almost every human job to a higher level of skill and capability, where they actually bring more of their human skills to, and where they, the value they bring are these truly human skills rather than doing stuff because you have to. It's like a good example, a very simple example, is what I do every day when I write for Forbes. I write in a way where I just get into the flow. I write an article, but then in order to publish this on Forbes, I then need to make sure I every subheadline and every headline, every word is capitalized.
Mm.
That is a huge waste of my time, even though it takes only 5 minutes or so, or 7 minutes for an article to go through that. I find this super annoying. It isn't definitely not the best use of my time. So what I now do is I give this to ChatGPT and say, hey,
Mm.
please do that.
Oh,
So
oh,
for
wow.
me, that is just a simple example of how it will take some of these mundane, repetitive things that we can simply give to machines and actually bring what is truly human to the table.
That is amazing. I never thought of this use case. Sometimes I have my caps lock on and I type the whole thing in capital letters, and now I can just tell ChatGPT to just fix it. So
Exactly, yeah.
yeah. It's very interesting how I was reading in 1940s when telephony was taking off, there was a huge amount of optimism for 1.4 million jobs to be created for telephone operators whose job was just to put cables in that switchboard. We know what happened to that job. That's a very sorry use of human capability. Why would you have spent your 8 hours a day just putting cables in a switchboard? So that got automated. So many jobs. But I want to dig a little bit deeper into your optimism about AI because right now we're in the middle of it. We can only predict the future. We don't know how it'll end. But if we look at some more recent technologies like Web3 and metaverse, what was your opinion on these technologies when they were at their peak?
Yeah, so the book I wrote before generative AI in practice was called The Future Internet.
Hmm,
And that focused on metaverse and Web3 as the key technologies that will transform
I see.
the internet of the future. And I still believe that. I believe that the future internet will become more realistic, more 3D, and it will become more decentralized. Um, so these technologies are still bubbling in the background, but we humans like these hype cycles. So we,
Hmm,
at the moment, it's all about Gen AI. But one chapter in my book, I talk about how different other technologies are influencing generative AI, like things like quantum computing, for example, that will accelerate it,
Quantum.
and how generative AI will impact other technologies. And for me, the metaverse, the 3D world is a perfect example where we can now use generative AI to create digital twins, for example. So there's more immersive, more realistic word is going to happen if you just it will take a bit of time. I think we will see initially a lot more. augmented reality use cases where we use our phone. For me, the example of virtual try-ons, I think, is a great example of making our world more immersive and more 3D, where you can now try jewelry on, you can try your makeup on
Mhm.
using these tools. And generative AI will enable this and push this technology along. Um, yeah, so for me, this technology is still there, and just lost my train of thought. But I was talking about Apple's Vision Pro glasses, for example. So
Hmm.
now we are looking at each other on a 2D screen. With those Vision Pro glasses, we will have a complete 3D immersive environment where we both wear the goggles.
Hmm.
The goggles then look at our facial expressions, and then the AI makes the goggles go away, so you can actually look at my face and I can look at your face with all your facial expressions in full 3D, which
Hmm.
will make this conversation so much more immersive and more realistic. And I think this is just a natural evolution that is going to happen.
Very interesting. I never expected that on this podcast we would be talking about some of these AI and the future of AI. I'm with you. I think we are going to see some pretty amazing developments, and and some of the hallucinations and the bad news that we hear. I think those problems will eventually get minimized. Uh, so, in fact, I have a very interesting thought. Today we see a lot of data breaches, and that's because the defender is always trying to have the most airtight environment possible, and the attacker just has to be one step ahead or find one loophole, and then they're in. But with AI, I think we are going to turn the tables around, where the attacker will always be on the defensive, because every move of the attacker will be caught by the LLM as an anomaly or a novelty or something that will put the attacker in the spotlight rather than the defender right now. So that just that's a little bit of my futurist piece here. But I want to change the topic here because we're getting to the end, and this has been fascinating. I would love to have you educate us, the listeners, on how did you get to 1.5 million followers on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so for me, I don't want to give anyone any piece of advice where they think this is just easy. For me, it was a mixture of relentlessly sharing content that people
Hmm.
found interesting and engaging with the community, and a little bit of luck as well. So I was probably one of the very first, because I was very close to the whole dot-com boom, was writing about that. And again, when social media and Web3 came out, I was following this very closely. So I was on Twitter early on. I was linking my Twitter to my LinkedIn, and I was posting several times a day
Oh.
and hopefully writing interesting content. And I think over time, um, LinkedIn picked my profile up as someone that was writing lots of content. And they approached me and said, we have picked 100 people that they
Hmm.
wanted to make their first influencers on LinkedIn. And when they first approached me, I thought they were joking. And I thought this was a spam email, because I thought it can't be me, because they said we picked Bill Gates and Richard Branson and Jack Welch and you, and so I
Oh,
said, okay,
wow.
this can't be right. And then they rang me and said, yes, we are serious about this. And I wish I would have understood the power of this immediately, because
Hmm.
I would have published so much more. And I think in the beginning I wrote maybe one or two articles a week. Um, and and it was amazing, because suddenly 1 million people would read your article, and they would push the content out, and this then helped me grow my audience massively. And then the next big innovation, so I had with all of these platforms, sometimes you have 1 million followers or 1.5 million. And in the beginning, when I posted, LinkedIn basically made sure that my 1.5 million followers would see my content, right? Their algorithms don't do this anymore. So I felt that the power of LinkedIn was going down. I was saying, okay, I can write articles, but now instead of 1 million people reading an article, I only get 10,000 people reading it. And I said, this is weird. And then what changed is that they introduced newsletters, or everyone can now have a newsletter. So I was very early on, I was among the first people that could try out this functionality. And again, LinkedIn then pushed my newsletter, and now I have almost 4 million newsletter subscribers,
Oh
which
my
is
God.
far more valuable than my followers, because I can write a piece of content and this gets emailed straight to people's inboxes. So that is, anyone who hasn't got a newsletter, I would highly recommend to create.
Hmm. That's fascinating. I don't have one. I mean, I have my web through my website, but I only do very rare. Wow. So I have a newsletter. 4
Mm,
million followers on newsletter is far bigger than the 1.5 million followers you have.
mm.
And so, okay, so that's good to know. How do you find time to keep up with everything that's going on in the industry, write your books and write these newsletters and the content?
Yeah, so I've become pretty good at it because all the pieces are falling together. So I now
Mhm.
work with many of the biggest tech companies in the world who continuously supply me with the most amazing use
I,
cases. And I then go and interview those people and speak to
I
them and
see.
learn about it. So just by producing content,
Mhm.
I a bit like going to all those conferences, you get to see innovative things in innovative use cases. You get to interview people, you speak to them. I try to read every single book that gets published on future technology. And the way I do this is I consume most of my books as audiobooks. So whenever I
Okay.
exercise, whenever I get in my car, the
Mhm.
audiobook is playing. And and this is automatic. As soon as I switch on my car, the book starts reading to me. Um, and and they are the key ways. And I think I've become good at writing articles and then converting those articles into books. This is now for me. I'm currently writing. Um, I've just started writing a new book on AI strategy, and my articles that I'm now writing are on that. And I've have a plan of what I want to cover in each of the chapters, and my articles then will cover some of those
Mm.
meaty chunks in this chapter. And then I just need to get some time in my diary for a few months where I say, okay, 2, 3 hours a day, I write for the book. But this is more about converting some of the content, some of the thinking I already have, and some of my notes into chapters. And then you just do this chapter by chapter, and then it all comes together.
Amazing. Very, very inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have one last question before we end. And I sometimes ask this question to my guests. Tell us something interesting about you that the world doesn't know in general.
Okay, what most people don't know about me is that I have a real passion for wine and winemaking. So I am on top of learning everything about AI and technology. I'm now also doing a qualification in the wine industry, and I actually started because this is for me how I learn, right? So you ask how do I keep up with stuff? For me, if a new concept comes out and I need to explain it, I need to write an article about it or
Mm,
even a book, which then means I need to get the thoughts straight in my head. And by the time I'm able to write it down, I have learned that. And this is how I learn really well. And I wanted to do this when I did my first qualification in wine. I felt that there were not really many websites that would explain this really simply. from the beginning, from how do you grow grapes, how do you taste wine, what are the different types of grapes, what are the different types of wine. And I actually started writing it for myself initially as little notes. And then I thought, hey, why don't I create a little website? So I now have a wine website called BM Wine Cellar, where I hopefully explain it in really simple terms.
So it's BM as in Bernard Marr,
Mm-hmm.
wine seller.
Cellar. Mm-hmm.
So bmwineseller.com.
ELLER. Yeah.
I had no idea. So are
Mm.
you training to become a sommelier?
I already have passed that. So I have it's like in the wine world, there's this international qualification called WSET,
Mhm.
Wine and Spirits Education Trust, and you can do level 1, level 2, level 3, and then you can go on to even do a diploma for a year and a half full time. And I have done my level 2, and I'm currently working on my level
Oh
3.
my God.
Mm.
Wow. That is fabulous. That I had no idea. And by the way, just to before we end, I just want to reiterate how important it is to write. When I wrote my first newsletter after I became independent, and in that I quoted something. One of my favorite lines is from this New York-based author who passed away a few years ago, Joan Didion. She wrote, "I write to find out what I'm thinking."
100%. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So on that upbeat note, this is amazing. Everything we've learned about AI and about winemaking and about writing conferences. Thank you so much for coming on to this episode. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev. It was a real pleasure. I really enjoyed this. It felt like we're just sitting somewhere in a quiet corner having a nice chat. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.